measurements, the metric system. So in the metric system, we have what we call metric prefixes. So these are words that come before, say, like a unit. So like a unit could be, if we look at mass, we're looking at grams. If we're looking at length, we're looking at meters. So this kind of tells us how large or how small our unit is. So this is a really nice system because it's really uniform and it just is a really great system. And this is kind of what's used like so in Canada or like in Europe, this is what they use. Or like in, say, in science, we use the metric system. So we have to do a lot of conversions between, say, our US customer units to the metric system. So let's go over the prefixes because this will help a lot. So if we have a, say, tera means a trillion. So it's a really large meaning for any unit that you have before it. Then we have next would be giga. So this is our big G or giga, which is our billion. Then we have mega. So mega is the prefix. If we want to shorten it, we just do like M, right? Like a lot of times, right, meters can be just like M. So it's kind of the same thing. So we have big M. This is for million. Then we have kilo. So little k. Kilo, which means 1,000. And then we have what we call our unit. Kind of like our base unit. So this is going to be, so for mass, it's grams. For like length, it would be meters. Or for volume, it's liters. Or if we're talking about our phones, we're going to talk about it in terms of bytes. This is like storage, right, on your phone. Right, so how often do we go into, say, AT&T or any of those stores and we ask for a certain kind of phone? Like, do we want a 64 gigabyte, right? We've seen this before, gigabyte or megabyte could be like a smaller app that's on your phone, but we see this all over, right? Like a 64 gigabyte like iPhone, right? Or we can say our app, say the weather app on our phone is in terms of megabytes, which is, like 3 megabytes for like the weather app. Right, so these are all like things we have seen or like really know, because how often do we have to delete things on our phones in order to make more room for our storage, right? So we know this. So this, then once we get to our unit, which is like kind of our base unit, and then we can go right below, and so now we're getting to smaller units. So we're going to look at, say, centi, which is little c. So centi, what does centi mean? Well, it means 1/100th. So that means we have to have 100 centi things to equal, say, if we have 100 centimeters, we'd equal a whole meter. So this is 1/100th. So it's a lot smaller than our base unit, right? So it's 1/100. Like 1 unit of that is 1/100 of the base unit. Then if we go down, right, like we see this a lot in our rulers, we have milli. So milli is then 1/1000th. And you can kind of also see how we are looking at all this, and these are all in powers of 10, right? To go from centi to a milli, it's like a whole power of 10 difference. So this is also why it's really nice to work on the metric system. You don't have to like think about all these like numbers like 4 or 6 or 8, like all those different kind of numbers that kind of happen in the US customer units. This is a lot more straightforward, and there's like a pattern we can kind of see. Now let's look at this in terms of mass now. So we have mass. So our base unit, right, is in grams. We measure things in grams, right? And so if you have a base unit of grams, it's kind of like this could be our, like, we can call our base unit. And so if you go from grams to, say, kilograms, well, you need, for 1 kilogram, right, is equal to 1,000 grams. So this can also be represented as kg is equal to 1,000 g. So that's another way to look at these units. We can just shorten it like this. Now, this is for mass. Now, let's go look at length. Now, let's look at length. So here we're going to start with our smallest on the top, and we're going to work our ways to the largest for here. So these are different ways to look at length. So we're just going to look at these in particular. So a millimeter is the smallest unit. So this is like right when you have a ruler, right, you can say you have 0 to 1 centimeter, right? And then this is broken down into 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So each one of these, this would be 1 millimeter. 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say this is 5 millimeters. And that's equal to 1 centimeter. So that's also 10 milliliters. So there are 10 milliliters in every centimeter. But into our base unit, which would be meters, right? This is our unit. This is our prefix, which will help us. So how many? We're going to look at this in terms of our base unit. So there are 1,000 milliliters is equal to 1 meter. Then we look at centimeters. Well, centi, also think about it in terms of a century, which is 100. Well, there are 100 centimeters into 1 meter. The meter is kind of our base unit, right? And then 1 meter is just a meter. And then we can look in terms of then kilometers. Well, kilometers, once we get to our base unit, now we're getting to the larger units. So then we have kilometers. So we have to have 1,000 meters, which is equal to 1 kilometer. Or we can say 1,000 little m is equal to 1 km. So these are kind of like the different relationships to go from one to the next. So it's just kind of to help you see how large or small things are in terms of one another. Now let's look at volume. So volume, we usually see this in millimeters and liters. So a milliliter, right, we have our prefix and we have our liters. Well, it's the same thing as, say, like back in length when we looked at milliliters. Instead of saying, so 1,000 milliliters is equal to 1 meter, we're going to say then 1,000 milliliters is equal to 1 liter. Or we can say 1,000 little m big L is equal to 1 big L, which is a liter. So this is really nice. You can kind of see, right, the pattern between all these different ways to look at measurements of mass, length, and volume. And then liters is just our base unit, right? And then if we had, say, kilo liters, right, what would that look like? Well, we know kilo, right, which means we have to have 1,000 liters is equal to a kiloliter. So if we have, say, 1 kiloliter is equal to then 1,000 liters.